And for the final.
Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I am your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have everybody here on this Tuesday, December 26th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today, but before I get into that, I just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. And as always, this is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So with that, let's get right into what we are going to talk about for today. So we're going to start off the show by talking about last night's game between the Ravens and the 49ers. Ravens winning 33-19, so we'll get into that. We'll talk about the Chiefs game from yesterday as well. Chiefs losing to the Raiders in that, so we'll get into that the second part of the show. In the third part of the show, we'll talk about the Eagles finally winning a game, getting back on track, and in a close one, defeating the Giants 33-25, and then we will talk about the Dolphins-Cowboys game from Sunday as well. I hope everybody had a good Christmas weekend. It was a good weekend, have some time off, spend some time with family and friends to recharge the batteries a little bit. So that was good, and I got to watch some football. Some implications with fantasy, of course, which I'll bring up briefly. And I got my typical 8 wins in the spread pool this week. So but we'll get into the fantasy implications with this game, because that's really what it came down to. So let's get into that. So this game was the two best teams between the Niners and the Ravens. That's what it was going in. And, both teams, same record in their respective conferences, best record in their respective conferences. The Ravens have been playing really well as of late. The Niners, same thing. Ever since they got, Deebo Samuel back and Trent Williams back, they looked like the team that they were in the, first part of the season. Because they had a little bit of a skid, of course. The Ravens, they, from start to finish, dominated this game. And, in the beginning, I shouldn't say from start to finish. From the very beginning, it looked like, oh, this isn't good. Because Lamar Jackson, gets charged with a intentional grounding penalty, and it was from him scrambling and going all the way back into the end zone, and they ended up calling a safety on that. Then the Niners kicked a field goal on their drive. So the Niners were up 5-0. Then the Ravens answered with a field goal to make it 5-3, which, it was a really weird score at one point. Brock Purdy threw a pick. The Niners, so the Ravens punted on their first drive. Then the Niners went down the field. Brock Purdy trying to hit Deebo Samuel gets intercepted by Kyle Hamilton, and it was set up by Purdy connecting with George Kittle for 58 yards. Then the Ravens got a safety. Then the Niners kicked a field goal. So that made it 5-0. And then the Ravens answered with a 8-play, 65-yard drive, 5 minutes of time of possession. Justin Tucker kicking a 28-yard field goal. So that made it 5-3. Then on the next drive, Brock Purdy throws another interception, and that was to Marlon Humphrey. Ravens turned that into a touchdown. That made it 10-5. Gus Edwards from 1 yard out. Then Brock Purdy threw another interception, and that time, again, was to Kyle Hamilton. Ravens kicked a field goal off of that to make it 13-5. Then the Niners were able to get a touchdown. Christian McCaffrey, 39-yard run, and then he got a touchdown from 9 yards out on that. So that made it 13-12. And then the Ravens went 11 plays, 64 yards to kick a field goal. So that made it 16-12. Justin Tucker from 28 yards out. And, so that was the end of the first half. Then we go to the second half. Niners punted. Ravens scored another touchdown. Lamar Jackson connected with Nelson Aguilar for a 6-yard touchdown. And that was set up by a Gus Edwards 39-yard reception, which was a short pass, of course. It was a great play by Lamar, too, scrambling and getting out of it and finding Gus Edwards. And he had a couple of those last night. Then the Niners, another interception. That was to Patrick Queen. Some of these were deflected up in the air, and the Ravens were able to pick it off. And then the Ravens turned that into a touchdown. Lamar connected with Zay Flowers, so that made it 30-12. Niners punted. Ravens kicked another field goal. We go to the fourth quarter. Ravens punted. Niners went 12 plays, 90 yards down the field. And, Brock Purdy actually had to leave the game. He got hurt in this game. So Sam Darnold came in, and he connected with Ronnie Bell for a 12-yard touchdown. Ravens punted, another interception in the game. Darnold got picked off. I was trying to hit Kittle. And, the Ravens ended up winning the game. It just not a great showing by the Niners. Brock Purdy, his numbers on the day, 18 of 32, 255 yards, no touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Sam Darnold came in, had 81 yards passing, a touchdown and a pick. Christian McCaffrey, again, another great game, 14 carries for 103 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle had good games, 7 receptions for 126 yards for Kittle, 6 receptions for 113 yards for Ayuk. Deebo Samuel had 4 for 47. McCaffrey had 6 for 28. Ronnie Bell had the 1 for 12 with a touchdown. And then for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, 23 of 35, 252 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Ravens ran the ball for 102 yards in total. Lamar was the leading rusher. He had that 30-yard scramble, which was just a great play by him, and that's what makes him. That's what kind of separates him from some of the other quarterbacks, is his ability to scramble like he does. And then you had Gus Edwards, 31 yards and a touchdown. Zay Flowers was their leading receiver, 9 for 72 and a touchdown, and Isaiah Likely had 3 for 56. Gus Edwards, 1 for 39. The Ravens had picks in this game. Of course, 4 picks. You had 5 picks in the game. Brock Purdy had 4. Kyle Hamilton had 2. Marcus Williams had 1. Patrick Queen 1, and Marlon Humphrey 1 as well. And this was a great performance by the Ravens. Again, in the very beginning, it didn't look good, but they pretty much dominated the game. Their defense, forcing Brock Purdy into 4 interceptions. They played a really solid game. And Lamar Jackson, he's a part of that MVP conversation. This is that year where it's really, there's no clear-cut MVP. Well, still think it should be Christian McCaffrey. I think, especially with Tyreek Hill missing a game, although he was able to come back and make some plays on Sunday against the Cowboys. But, this should be Christian McCaffrey's award. But Lamar Jackson is definitely up there. And Brock Purdy, he plummeted after last night. And now all the Brock Purdy, haters have come out and they're saying, he's a system QB. You even have Cam Newton tweeting something, with Purdy throwing the 4 picks. So, it's not a good performance by him. But, again, I think that has more so to do with what the Ravens were able to do last night. And they put, the NFL on notice with that. That they dominated the Niners, and this was on the road. Not an easy place to play, and they got the job done. And you got to give them credit. And this was the game which was arguably the 2 best teams in the NFL. Now, the Niners, they were looked at as, the top team. Ravens were like number 2. But after that win, Ravens kind of have that blueprint. They have the defense, and they showed it last night. And the other thing, too, is, and I've been saying this, for weeks now, is, these last couple of seasons, Lamar Jackson has been hurt at this point in the year, and that's kind of hurt the Ravens season. But now, he's the only QB healthy from that division. So, and he's playing really well, and it helps that he finally has some weapons to work with. I know the running back situation isn't the best, but Gus Edwards did his job last night. You have Keaton Mitchell tearing his ACL. Dobbins earlier in the year tearing his Achilles. But you know what? You got Lamar Jackson. Like I said, Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, they can get the job done. They're not elite running backs by any means, but you know what? They're serviceable. And then, of course, you have... Mark Andrews has been hurt, but you got Isaiah Likely stepping up, the young tight end. You got Zay Flowers, who's been great, in his rookie season. Although I wish he did good, last week when I needed him, but that doesn't matter at this point. Odell Beckham Jr. has been decent. So, you got weapons to throw to, and that's something that the Ravens kind of lacked. Nelson Aguilar also catching a touchdown last night. The Ravens looked really good, and you know what? They could be the best team in the NFL now with that win. Because like I said, they might have the blueprint. They did have the blueprint to beat the Niners last night. So, but I just want to bring up my fantasy matchup briefly. So I was in the playoffs, and I was in 2 leagues. I was still alive, and I lost in both of them. Now, one of them I lost by 20. If we would have started George Pickens, we would have won. But again, he hasn't been great. But of course, he goes off, with Mason Rudolph at quarterback. So the other league, so I was up by 48 going into yesterday's games. Well, first I was losing by a lot, and then after Thursday and Saturday's games, then I was up after Sunday's games. So going into yesterday, I was like, listen, there's still a lot of people left to be played on my friend's side, so hopefully, we're able to pull it out. And it came down to Deebo Samuel last night, and I ended up losing by 1.22. I lost 128.8 to 127.58 because of Deebo Samuel's final catch. I think it was on the 4th down play. Yeah, so I'm out of the playoffs. Knocked out. In both leagues, so there will be no championship coming home this year, which was very... and it was just annoying because I was like, Deebo, just get it over with. And I thought it was going to be when Purdy was trying to connect with him in the beginning for the touchdown, and then Kyle Hamilton picked it off. But it came down to like the final 3 minutes in the 4th quarter for me to finally lose. It was like, just get it over with. But this has happened where, I'm like, I'm going to lose this game. And then it's just they wait till the very end because they want to give me hope that I'm going to win, and then I end up losing. So, yeah, just another depressing defeat. But, with this game, though, listen, the Ravens put the NFL on notice, like I said. And to me, the only team, well, not the only team, but the Ravens have to beat themselves if they don't make it to the Super Bowl. Because we've seen, in the Browns game, the Colts game, the Steelers, they've had some bad games. And again, every team has. The Niners had another bad game last night against the Ravens. But to me, the Ravens, you look at the landscape of the AFC. Who's going to beat the Ravens? I don't think, not the Chiefs. We'll see what the Dolphins do next week. They already beat the Jags. The Ravens have to beat themselves, I think, if they don't make it to the Super Bowl. But, because they played a clean game other than the safety. Defense played well. They have the best record in the AFC for a reason. So, but yeah, so Ravens get the win. Niners will rebound, but that was a rough game. So they got to figure some stuff out after that. So with that, we're going to take our first break of the show, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about a team that is in trouble, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs, because yesterday, oh boy, that was not a good performance. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about the Chiefs and the Raiders yesterday. Raiders pulling off the upset. They were 10.5-point underdogs, then it went up to 11.5. Yeah, I mean, for yesterday's games, I thought, listen, the Chiefs are going to blow out the Raiders. Eagles are going to blow out the Giants, and then the Ravens are going to cover, and I'm going to go 3-0. Well, that wasn't the case. I ended up going 1-2 again on the holidays. Raiders winning 20-14, and without scoring an offensive touchdown. The Chiefs, listen, and they have the tendency to do this. And I feel like in a year like this, where your offense is struggling, you can't lollygag. And that's what they did yesterday. On 2 plays. Not 2 plays, but 1. They fumbled, which then led to a touchdown, where you had Isaiah Pacheco taking the direct snap, Mahomes coming over, and it was just miscommunication there, because was Pacheco supposed to keep it and run with it? Because he did do that on another play, and that was for the touchdown. It wasn't like the same exact play that they were running, but Pacheco faked it, and then he ran it in. But this one, I guess Pacheco was supposed to keep it and then run, and instead they ended up fumbling the ball. Raiders picked it up, scored a touchdown. So that made it 10-7. Well, 9-7. Then they kicked the extra point. And then they did miss the extra point. Did they miss the extra point? Well, regardless, then the Chiefs throw a pick 6. Mahomes throws a pick 6 on the next play by Jones. So, regardless, it was a 10-point game. It was just on back-to-back plays. And then you have Butker. So the Chiefs goes 13 plays, 57 yards down the field. And then Butker misses a 36-yard field goal. So if you want it now, I just told you how much I lost by in my fantasy matchup. If Butker makes that kick, then we're having a different conversation. So the Chiefs then go into the half down 10. Raiders punted. Chiefs turned it over on downs. Both teams punted again. Raiders kicked another field goal. Chiefs turned it over on downs. Fourth quarter comes. There was only 3 possessions. Raiders punted. Chiefs then go down the field, 9 plays, 69 yards. Mahomes connects with Justin Watson for a 7-yard touchdown. So that makes it 20-14. And then the Raiders just keep the ball the rest of the way, and they're able to win it. Zamir White had a couple of big runs in this game, and again, same thing with the fantasy matchup. My friend had Josh Jacobs. He had to start Zamir White instead, which I thought was going to be beneficial, and it ended up not being the case because he ended up having 145 yards rushing on the day. But yeah, the Raiders didn't score an offensive touchdown. Aiden O'Connell only went 9-21 for 62 yards. No touchdowns, no picks. Zamir White, like I said, 145 yards rushing on 22 carries. Jacoby Myers was their leading receiver. He had 3 receptions for 42 yards. Then on the Chiefs side, The Chiefs Mahomes went 27-44, 235 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. They actually did a fake punt that was successful. Tommy Townsend, an 11-yard pass, and I think that was to Justin Watson. Isaiah Pacheco actually left the game with a concussion, but he had 26 yards rushing and a touchdown. The Raiders' defense did a great job in this game. Rashee Rice was their leading receiver. He had 57 yards. Richie James had a 45-yard reception. He had 54 yards in total. Travis Kelce had 5 for 44. Justin Watson had 4 for 38. Edwards-Helaire had 3 for 42. But yeah, Mahomes, he did fumble, but he didn't lose it. Pacheco got charged with the fumble on that direct snap play. Chiefs had a couple of sacks in this game. The Raiders actually had 4 sacks in this game. Malcolm Kuntz, I think that's how you pronounce it. He had 3 sacks in the game, and then Adam Butler had 1. I mean, the Raiders' defense did a great job in this game. I mean, credit to them. Credit to Antonio Pierce, really. I mean, this team, from how it started to how it's going, I mean, listen, they're probably not making the play. I mean, listen, they can still make the playoffs, but they probably aren't going to. But credit to Antonio Pierce and what he's been able to do. I mean, listen, they lost 3-0 to the Vikings. They should have won that game. I'm looking at their schedule now. But you only lost by 7 to the Dolphins. You were up against the Chiefs in Vegas, but they weren't able to hold on to that lead. And then you lose 3-0. I mean, ever since he's taken over, this team, it's looked like a different team. The defense, I mean, getting turnovers, pick sixes. I mean, they just put up 63 points against the Chargers. I mean, listen, he deserves to get that job. And they got 2 winnable games coming up. They could finish with a winning record. They could. Now, I think they need a quarterback. Aiden O'Connell has had his moments, but I don't think he's the guy. I mean, I think you give him a chance to be the guy, but I think you got to bring in another quarterback. Through the draft or whatnot. But, yeah, I mean, they still have a chance. I mean, it's going to be tough because you got the Colts and then the Broncos at home. But they got a shot to finish with a winning record. They definitely do. I mean, and also Zamir White. The times that he's filled in for Josh Jacobs, he's done a nice job. Especially yesterday. I mean, rushing for over 140 yards on 22 carries. Again, at the expense of my fantasy season, but he did a nice job, without Josh Jacobs. And the defense, 2 turnovers, they capitalized. And the Chiefs just could not get anything going. I mean, there's miscommunication with the receivers. You got Travis Kelce throwing his helmet. And then they're going to bring it back to him, and Andy Reid stopped them from getting it back to him. And, he gave Kelce, he kind of shoved Kelce a little bit because he was getting on him for doing that. But, yeah, the Chiefs are in disarray right now. And, I mean, they look like a team that could be one and done in the playoffs, honestly. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, I think they'll at least win one. I think they should at least win one playoff game. But this just does not look like their year. There's a lot of problems with them. But you know what? Listen, they've been good, every year since Mahomes has entered the league. I mean, they're due for at least one bad year. And I mean, listen, they should still get into the playoffs. And host a playoff game. But I mean, even so, their offense is struggling right now. Again, they really couldn't run the football yesterday. Pacheco gets hurt, and they were already without Jerick McKinnon. So they're kind of shorthanded there, and the receivers. I mean, Rashee Rice has been good, but that's really about it. Valdez-Scantling, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney was out yesterday. They're struggling on offense. And when you get to the playoffs, I mean, listen, you got the Browns, you got the Bills now who are in a playoff spot. We'll see who gets the final wild card spot. But, I mean, if you got to go up against one of those teams in the first round, I mean, look at how Joe Flacco's playing. Again, they picked up another win against the Texans. But even the Colts too. Colts got a good running game. I mean, it's now again you got Gardner Minshew at quarterback, who's played well, but again, you're gonna go up against a tough team, as a 3 seed. Because um, I think right now, you look at, who's in the wild card right now, and you look who's in the wild card right now. So you got the Browns, the Bills, and the Colts. Texans are 1 game back. Steelers are 1 game back. Bengals are 1 game back. I think the Texans get that final spot if Stroud comes back. If Stroud doesn't come back, then that's different. But we'll see. It's probably going to come down to the Colts and the Texans because I don't know what happened to the Bengals on Saturday, but now that you got the Steelers still in the conversation, but again, it's going to be a dogfight to the end. And you got the Raiders at 7-8, still technically in it. Broncos are 7-8. We'll talk about that game at some point this week, probably tomorrow. But yeah, the Chiefs. Well, right now they'd be going up. Right, they'd be going up against the Bills. Right? Yeah, they'd be going up against the Bills again, and I would not favor the Chiefs in that game. Now the Chiefs, if Kadarius Toney doesn't line up offsides, odds are they end up winning that game. It's definitely not going well for them right now. And we'll see. Are they gonna? Listen. Earlier in the year, I said, they'll turn it around because that's what they do. They hit these skids, but then they're able to ultimately figure it out. But it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough. Got a chat, and it's from Andrew Tate, who's a big part of the GSMC Sports Network. And he says I would take the Bills over the Chiefs, and yeah, I would do the same thing because now the Bills have their issues too. With a lot of guys injured on defense, but I would still take them over the Chiefs. Josh Allen's playing better. James Cook, he had that monster game against the Cowboys. Not the same thing against the Chargers. He fumbled in that game. The Bills almost lost on Saturday against Easton Stick and the Chargers, but I still right now would take the Bills. But that's right now what it's lined up as is the Bills and the Chiefs, in the first round if it stays like this. Because right now the Dolphins have the 2 seed. So we'll see. And listen, I wouldn't say no to another Mahomes-Allen playoff game, but it probably end a little bit differently the way these teams are kind of heading. So we'll just have to wait and see. But before we go into our second break of the show, once again, I just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. And as always, this is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So, when we get back from our second break of the show, we'll talk about the Eagles-Giants game from yesterday. Eagles, if you want to call it getting back on track, well, that's what I'm calling it, getting a win, even though it wasn't pretty, ending their losing streak. So that is what we'll get into when we get back from our second break of the show. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to now talk about the Eagles-Giants game from yesterday. Eagles, again, I guess, I said Eagles get back on track, but they defeated the Giants 33-25, and it was an interesting game because the Giants haven't won in Philly in 10 years. Now, again, they didn't win, but they made it interesting. They definitely made it interesting. Tommy DeVito got benched in this game. They brought in Tyrod Taylor, and that kind of changed it a little bit because the Giants actually outscored the Eagles 15-0 in the third quarter. And the Eagles, they, again, made silly mistakes. One of them was on, a kickoff return. Boston Scott ran into one of his own guys. They ended up fumbling the ball, and then the Giants capitalized, got a touchdown off of that. Saquon Barkley scoring a rushing touchdown. They actually went for two and got it at one point. I think it was on that possession. Or was it? No, that was an extra point. No, it was on the picks. Okay, the pick six is where the 2-point conversion came into play. But yeah, so it pretty much looked like the Eagles were going to dominate this game. It was 20-3 at the half. But you know what? The Giants, they give them credit. They battled. They made it interesting. The Eagles, well, actually, it got set up by a big return, and then their drive was 2 plays, 13 yards. Hurts, the tush push, of course. He gets into the end zone. He breaks Cam Newton's single-season rushing touchdown record. Of course, people are not really happy about that because, of how he's doing it. When you got Cam Newton, who was running over people and doing flips in the air, Jalen Hurts is just getting pushed into the end zone. But he's got it now, so that made it 7-0. Then the Giants, they went down the field. They kicked a field goal. Mason Crosby was kicking field goals for the Giants now. 52-yard field goal, the former longtime Packer. Then the Eagles on their drive, they went 10 plays. Or no, they went 18 plays, 72 yards. I'm looking at the score. So it made it 10-3. 8 minutes, 11 seconds of time of possession. And Jake Elliott kicked a 28-yard field goal. So that made it 10-3. And that was the first quarter. Then the Eagles scored another touchdown to make it 17-3. Jalen Hurts connecting with Devontae Smith for his 36-yard touchdown. Then it was 20-3 at the half. Jake Elliott kicking a 21-yard field goal. It just looked like the Eagles were going to dominate this game. But then the Giants, they scored a touchdown. Saquon Barkley, they used him a lot. Scored a 7-yard touchdown. So that made it 20-10. Then the Eagles punted on their drive. Then the Giants punted. That was on the kickoff return. They got that was fumbled. And then Jalen Hurts threw a pick six to Adoree Jackson for 76 yards, and that made it 20-16. Giants went for two. Barkley got it. And then the Eagles answered with a touchdown. DeAndre Swift from 5 yards out made it 27-18. And then the Giants turned it over on downs. Eagles kicked another field goal. And then Tyrod Taylor connected with Darius Slayton for a 69-yard touchdown. So that made it 30-25. Then Jake Elliott kicked a field goal at the end of the game, 43 yards, which again could also be responsible for why I lost in my fantasy matchup. And then Tyrod Taylor, the Giants drove down the field. There was a penalty that wasn't called. It looked like there was defensive pass interference on Wan'Dale Robinson, but they didn't call it. Tyrod Taylor connected with Darren Waller for a 20-yard reception on 4th and 8. Then they spiked the ball, and they threw it to the end zone. It got picked off, and that was it. And the Eagles won the game. Jalen Hurts, he went 24 of 38, 301 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, which is the pick six. Eagles ran the ball for 170 yards. DeAndre Swift had 92 yards rushing and a touchdown. Jalen Hurts had 34 yards rushing and a touchdown. Kenneth Gainwell had 41. A.J. Brown had 80 yards receiving. Devontae Smith had 79 yards receiving and a touchdown. Dallas Goedert had 71. Boston Scott fumbled in the game, and that was on the kickoff. which led to the Giants getting 8 points out of that. And Adoree Jackson, of course, had the pick. But yeah, I mean, the Giants made it competitive, but they just they weren't able to tie the game or go ahead, but they made it competitive. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't. I mean, the Eagles, they get back on track because they get the win, but they could have very easily, lost that game if they were playing a better team. But yeah, I mean, it looks like the Tommy Cutlets era could be over. Well, I shouldn't say that. I feel like he should still be a part of the team, but again, he's a backup quarterback. That's what he is. And it's funny because one of my Christmas gifts was a Tommy Cutlets T-shirt. So it's a blue T-shirt with Giants colors, and it's got the hand gesture on it. So and of course I get that, and he gets benched. So that looks like. I mean, we'll see what the Giants do. Like, will they start him next week? I don't know. I mean, at this point, it doesn't really matter. The games don't matter. But that's why. I mean, that's why I really couldn't get excited over it, because I'm just like, this is gonna end in heartbreak. It's gonna flame out. He's not the franchise quarterback. But you know what? He does deserve a role on this team. He does. But he's a backup. Again, he's a backup quarterback. But I ended up getting that game wrong. I mean, the Eagles, they again making mistakes, and you go up against a better team, and it's gonna really hurt you. Now, the Eagles are in a good spot because now you got the Cardinals next week, then you got the Giants again, and all you got to do is win out, and you got yourself a top 2 seed, and you got the division. Now, they're fortunate the Cowboys lost, so now they're a game up on them. The Cowboys have the Lions and the Commanders left, and the Eagles have the Cardinals and the Giants, which I think they should win both games. But, I mean, they, let the Giants come back in the game. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens down the stretch. But yeah, I mean, I really don't know what to make of this season. I mean, you have so many teams that just, listen, the Ravens beat the Niners last night, but again, they've had their bad losses. The Niners have had theirs, including last night. The Eagles and how they've been playing. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen in these playoffs. It's really going to be fascinating to watch what ends up happening, because you have no idea. But yeah, the Eagles still aren't playing great. They're not. There's still, again, the mistakes are, again, they could really cost them, and they have during the losing streak. So I mean, we'll just have to. I mean, we'll see how it goes. But, you got the Cardinals and the Giants get to the playoffs, and we'll see. But right now, the division looks like it's going to be theirs. Cowboys, again, they got a tough game with the Lions, who can put up points, but I feel like they're going to win that game. And then they got the Commanders. So I expect the Cowboys to win their next 2. Eagles, I expect to win their next 2. So it's going to be the Cowboys at the 5 and the Eagles at the 2. Unless they get upset, which, I really don't see them losing to the Giants in MetLife. But listen, the Giants played them tough, and that just goes. And they exploited that secondary. That secondary really has problems. I mean, Tyrod Taylor came in and. He hit that long pass to Slayton. There was that 4th and 1 with the Giants, right? 4th and 1 where the Giants turned it over on downs, and they had Waller open, and Taylor just underthrew it a little bit. And if you put more air underneath that, Waller's gone for a touchdown. So this game could have been even more interesting. But again, the Eagles, they made mistakes, and that's what allowed the Giants to get back in it. The pick six and, the kickoff return fumble. The Giants cashed in. I know there was one play in the game where it was 3rd and 20 and they allowed, Jalen Hurts to connect with A.J. Brown. You don't let that happen. I mean, that changes the game. But, again, the Giants, that was another Giants loss where, they give you hope. Like, oh, they're coming back. They're making this competitive in a place they don't play well in. And then they end up losing in the end. We've seen that many times with this team over the years. Going, after the Super Bowl. But yeah, they're just not a good team. And again, if that was a good team that the Eagles were facing yesterday, they would have lost that game. They would have. But they're lucky they were playing the Giants. So, yeah, I mean, listen, the Eagles, at least they won a game, but it wasn't pretty. I mean, the first half, it looked like, yeah, this is what the Eagles do to the Giants in Philly. But, of course, make it interesting. I mean, all these games had to be interesting because, they were all standalone games, So, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens in these final 2 games. But, at least for the Eagles, they get the win. And for the Giants, I mean, we'll see what they do. I mean, is Tommy Cutlets going to get the start next week, or is it going to be Tyrod Taylor the rest of the way? I guess because Dable was just, looking for a spark or something because, I mean, if DeVito finished that game, I mean, who knows? But, we'll see what happens. But, yeah, that's pretty much it when talking about this topic. Then we're going to actually get into the final segment of the show when we get back, and that's going to be talking about the Dolphins prevailing versus the Cowboys winning 22-20 on Sunday, the 4:25 game. Well, Eastern time. That was a big game there. So that is what we will talk about in the final segment of the show, is getting into that game. Because that game was huge for both teams. But like I said, the Dolphins prevailed. So that is what we'll get into when we come back from our final break of the show. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we're going to talk about the Cowboys-Dolphins game from Sunday. We'll get into that, and then that'll be it for the show. So with this game, you have the Cowboys, a team that struggle to beat teams on the road. And then you have the Dolphins, who haven't beaten a team with a winning record. Right? Yeah, they haven't beaten a team with a winning record. So... yeah, this was going to be a statement win for somebody, that ended up at least one team prevailed, and that was the Dolphins, winning 22-20. So we'll get into the how this all unfolded. So the Cowboys, they went right down the field in their first drive, 15 plays, 73 yards, almost 8 minutes of time of possession. And they ended up fumbling. Tony Pollard ended up fumbling. Or no, Dak Prescott ended up fumbling. Pollard actually, it looked like he was going to score, but they held him out. And then, they ended up fumbling the Cowboys. So then the Dolphins took over. and they went 10 plays, 59 yards. 4 minutes, 27 seconds of time of possession. Kicked a field goal. Jason Sanders, he was busy. He had a lot of field goals in this game. 57-yarder to make it 3-0. And then the Cowboys on their next drive went 3 plays, 75 yards. Dak Prescott connected with CeeDee Lamb for a 49-yard touchdown, so that made it 7-3. Dolphins then turned it over on downs. Cowboys punted. Dolphins kicked another field goal. Jason Sanders from 52 yards out. See, I could have used him, this week instead of Harrison Butker in fantasy. Then the Cowboys punted. Then the Dolphins went 8 plays, 71 yards. And Tua Tagovailoa connected with Raheem Mostert for a 4-yard touchdown, so that made it 13-7. And that was the score at the half. Then both teams punted. Dolphins kicked another field goal, a 54-yarder from Jason Sanders. I mean, he had a game, really. So that made 16-7. Then the Cowboys kicked a field goal. Brandon Arbery, 43-yard field goal to make it 16-10. Then the Dolphins answered with another field goal, a 35-yarder from Jason Sanders, and the Cowboys kicked a field goal, Arbery from 33 yards out. So that made it 19-13. Dolphins punted. Then the Cowboys went 17 plays, 69 yards, 7 minutes, 39 seconds of time of possession down the field, and Dak Prescott connected with Brandon Cooks for an 8-yard touchdown. So that made it 20-19, and I thought at that point, I was like, Tua was going to throw a pick or something, and the Cowboys are going to get a win. But no, the Dolphins, they get in the field goal range, and Jason Sanders kicks a 29-yard field goal to get the win. Dolphins win 22-20, improve to 11-4. Cowboys drop to 10-5. Dak Prescott went 20-32, 253 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Cowboys only ran the ball for 97 yards. Tony Pollard had 38. Dak Prescott had 25. CeeDee Lamb had a great game. 6 receptions for 118 yards and a touchdown. Then for the Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa had a good game, 24-37. 293 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Cowboys held the Dolphins to under 100 yards. So, and that was something that I thought the Cowboys were going to get shredded in the running game. I mean, they did last week with James Cook, but not this week. I mean, Mostert had 46. He actually got banged up in this game. Waddle also got banged up in this game as well. He only had that 1 catch for 50 yards. Achane had 24 yards rushing. Jeff Wilson had 21. Tyreek Hill was the leading receiver. 14 targets, 9 receptions for 99 yards. Raheem Mostert had the 1 reception for 4 yards for the touchdown. The Dolphins, that was a big win for them. And again, it doesn't get easy because they play the Ravens and the Bills the next 2 weeks. So they got a lot on their plate. And then as for the Cowboys, you got the Lions, and then you got the Commanders to finish off the year. But listen, the Cowboys, played better than they did against the Bills at least. I mean, they honestly should have won the game. But they ended up losing again, and people are going to look at them as frauds. People kind of look at the Dolphins. People look at the Dolphins as being fraudulent. I mean, I did, that segment talking about them and the Lions. The Dolphins, they haven't, until they beat the Cowboys yesterday, they hadn't beaten a team over 500. But that was a big win for them. Cowboys, they're a good team. I mean, these teams are both good, but they're not. I don't think they're going to end up in the dance. I don't see that happening. Unless the 49ers get knocked out, then that's a different story. But the Cowboys, listen, I mean, they're a team that struggles on the road, and odds are they're probably going to have to go to Philly and San Francisco if they're going to want to get to the Super Bowl, and I don't think they're going to be able to do it. And then, for the Dolphins, I mean, listen, the AFC is weak, but, they struggle against good teams. And Jason Sanders had to kick all these field goals for them to win. So, they only scored 1 offensive touchdown, and that was Mostert. And other than that, if it wasn't for Jason Sanders, they don't win this game. They got into field goal range. They were able to move the ball and get it into field goal range. But, they they didn't put up as much points as we're accustomed to seeing. I mean, you beat the Jets 30-0, but again, that's the Jets. That's a team that struggles offensively. So, I'm not gonna say we kind of know what these teams are. After this game, we didn't really learn anything. But we'll see. I mean, again, everybody this year is beatable. So, we could talk about these teams right now, but these teams have loaded offenses and they got playmakers on defense as well. But we've seen, the Cowboys defense, although it did play better, they didn't get shredded in the running game like they did with the Bills. But, the Cowboys defense prior to that, Seattle and against Buffalo, I mean, giving up a lot of points. And everybody's talking about, with Tyreek Hill being out, the Dolphins are a different team, but having him back is huge. And it's going to be huge going into next week because, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Waddle, if he ends up playing. And Tyreek Hill is still, banged up a little bit with the ankle injury. So they need him. And they're going up against the Ravens, who just are coming off of a win against the Niners last night. So, we'll see what happens. But, I mean, this was, at least for the Dolphins, they could say, hey, we beat a team with a winning record. And then for the Cowboys, you get the criticism of, well, another game you lost on the road. But now they go back home to play the Lions, which I think they should win. As the Lions were struggling against Nick Mullins, who threw for over 400 yards, but interceptions are a problem. So the Cowboys should be able to move the ball on the Lions defense. That game's going to be a problem for the Lions. But we'll see. I hope it's a great game. That game actually will be on Saturday. So, we'll see how that goes. And then, we'll go from there. So, I think I think we'll wrap the show up here. So, with that is all the time that we have for today. I thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow. And, discuss more of the games from this past week. We'll take a look at the playoff picture. We only got 2 weeks left in the regular season now. And now with my fantasy season being over, I could pretty much kind of, other than I still got the spread pool, but I could pretty much relax a little bit now. I don't have to stress out anymore. Because, the fact that the last night's game came down to, the final, couple of minutes for me to lose, I was stressing. And, I don't want to have to deal with that anymore. But, yeah, I'm going to have to, it's going to be a long off season, but, hopefully next year I can get myself back to this point and maybe things will be different, but, who knows. But, once again, I hope everybody had a good holiday weekend, and, we'll be back again tomorrow. So that is all the time that we have for today. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Rurenfelder, signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.